Hello and welcome everybody. Today we are going to continue studying the Chigorin's gambit in the two knights defense. And I would like to show you for the first time how Mikhail Chigorin started to play, I would say in 1882 for the first time, this gambit line. And since then, this gambit variation, one of the most popular in the two-knight defense, is the best weapon for black against the white's knight g5, very aggressive attempt. So after knight g5, we are studying already. I just like to remind you that possible in this position to play bishop c5, which leads to the Traxler counter gambit. So black is intending immediately to attack white's position, especially the weakest spot, the f2 pawn, despite the fact after knight takes f7 and bishop takes f2, extremely complicated game could be achieved after king takes f2 and knight takes e4, which if you would like to study carefully, you can watch my lessons regarding the Traxler counter gambits already recorded. Indeed, if you are having not so great memory and you would like to play more positional game, trying to use the, I would say, a bit wrong attempt for white, just white's attack looks like too early because white is moving once again the same piece from f3 to g5 just for trying to set the great target on f7. So black after d5 and e takes d5, not necessary to capture the pawn on d5. So after knight takes d5, unfortunately knight takes f7, we are going into the very famous Fred lever attack. But to continue knight a5, bishop b5 check, c6, d takes c6, b takes c6, and this is a standard tabia, so I would say the classical position of the two knights defense, the Chigorin attack, Chigorin gambit. So first game, which I would like to show you, was played against the English chess player Henry Beard in 1882. And in that game, in the Vienna International Chess Tournament, Henry Beard played bishop e2. h6, so this is direct attempt. Immediately black is attacking white's knight on g5, so white has to spend more tempi and black is getting clear positional advantage, so much better development after e4. So knight has to go once again. Now if white is playing, of course, knight g1, that after bishop c5, black is having all the pieces in the game, and unpleasant threat queen d4, let's say, which could happen after knight c3, queen d4, and white immediately losing. Pay attention. So this almost forced white after e4 to move the knight to e5. And here we start, I would say black is having different options. So black could play bishop d6, black can play queen c7, immediately attacking the knight, or even queen d4, which we studied the last time. So today, queen d4 move, according to the theory, not the strongest continuation. Not because of knight g4. After knight g4, black has bishop take g4, bishop take g4, and e3 with quite unpleasant threats. So this pawn cannot be captured because the g4 bishop is hanging, and black is winning the f2 pawn. White's king is losing the castling right. So black is having quite serious initiative in this position. But white is not forced to play knight g4. So much strongest continuation is f4, and after bishop c5, rook f1. Black is under threat of c3, getting rid of the queen from these active positions, and d4 or b4, winning a piece, not allowing black immediately to continue his attack. So black has to retry with the queen, and then white could play c3 and then d4, trying to complete the development. By the way, this knight on e5 is not so bad placed. So that's why today, usually black is not playing queen d4 anymore. And the mainstream in this situation is trying to attack knight on e5 by queen c7 or bishop d6. So in that first game played by Mikhail Chigorin, 80-82, queen c7 was played. Knight g4, not the best continuation. So today, mostly recommended for white to play d4, and we will study it later on. So after d4, e takes d3, okay. Knight takes d3 and bishop d6. White still cannot castle, short side, so black is very fast developing all his pieces. And after, let's say, white spends the time after h3, short castling, and here black has a few options. Could move immediately the pawn after c5, c4. Look, all the pieces very actively looking towards the white's king side. So this knight from a5 could very fast come into the game after knight c4 or c5, knight c6. Bishop from c8 could be developed or to b7 or to f5. Black is having great open files, e8 and d8. So all the pieces very fast coming into the game, and it's not a question. So black usually is having enough compensation for a pawn. And that position, I would say, was tested many times. So in that game, Bird immediately played knight g4. And this is first and quite interesting reaction by Chigorin. So instead of capturing on g4 with the knight, he just doesn't like to spend any more time, but captured with the bishop. So already developing knight, he captured by the bishop, even allowed white 2 bishops advantage, but after bishop d6, it's quite difficult for white to complete the development of its queen side, and also it's no time for castling the short side because h2 pawn is hanging. h3, short castling, knight c3, and important, very important move, knight c4. So black not only having development advantage, but black is also controlling the center. So knight is going to be placed very nicely on e5. Then, later on, black is going to move away the knight from f6, and after f5 and f4, it is extremely difficult for white to stop black's threat on the king side. So we immediately could see what happened in the game. After b3, knight e5, and bishop b2, white still doesn't know where to move the king. So maybe white is planning to move the queen to e2, and then maybe long castling. Rook f to e8. So now white realized that unfortunately queen e2 doesn't work. Can you see why? Not because of knight take g4, but because another tactical trick, knight d3 check. Pay attention that queen and the king under the threat. So after c takes and e takes, white is losing immediately. So this pin is deadful. White is losing the queen. And if you play something like king d1 check and king c1, black just simply could play bishop a3, protecting this knight. And once again, all the threats are coming. Knight d3, queen a5, etc. White is completely lost. So, with this bad news, white decided to castle finally the king to the king side. But of course, when all black pieces are looking toward it, that is not the greatest idea. After knight takes g4, knight e take g4, h take g4, and queen d7, suddenly white is going to lose this pawn. Since f3 extremely dangerous to play because it's weakening all the dark square near the king. So black could continue attack after bishop c5 or even after bishop c7 with idea queen d6, for instance. So it's quite unpleasant situation for white. Very dangerous. Just give you the example. Let's say I can play queen c7 with idea queen d6. White captures, that I give a check. Rook f2 cannot be played because bishop or b6 or bishop g3, black is simply winning. So white has to move the king, but in that case after queen e5 there could be almost no way to stop against the decisive threats on the king side. So white decided to sacrifice the pawn on g4. I would say not sacrifice, just white is losing this pawn on g4. Queen e2, knight take g4, g3, and queen f5. So black is still keeping very unpleasant threats. So next idea is to move the queen to h5 and queen h2 checkmate. So quite difficult to stop it. King g2. With the idea to meet queen h5 by rook h1. But of course, black is having so great position, especially look at the pawn on e4, which prevents white from all the moves like d3 and f3, or just simply rook e6. All the pieces still are looking towards the white's king side. It's only a matter of time for how long white could survive here, this king side attack. Rook e1 and second rook coming to the game, rook e8. Rook h1, black is also having pawn's majority on the king side, so Chigorin played simply h5. Rook e to e f1, queen g6, freeing the last resource for destroying white's king side structure. Knight d1. And here Chigorin started a very nice combination. So pay attention that queen g6 had not only idea f7, f5, but the g3 pawn is another target. So Chigorin just completely demolishes white's position on the king side by the nice pawns move, e4, e3. So now if white captures d takes e3, black is winning immediately, takes. So f takes e3 will be led to checkmate after queen takes g3. And knight takes e3, still the rook takes e3. And white can stop the decisive mating pattern after rook takes g3. Game is over. So already after e3, it's extremely difficult to play for white. So his king side is completely ruined. Bishop d4. Knight takes f2. Once again threatening the checkmate. Rook takes f2. Queen takes g3. King f1. E takes f2. So now queen cannot capture on f2. Not because black is having the extra material, but because of checkmate after rook e1, queen takes e1 and rook takes e1. So only way to play knight e3 in this position, but it cannot last for a while. c5, bishop c3, rook takes e3. So always Chigorin try to finish the game with a nice combination, and this example shown as the greatest talent of the Russian chess player. Rook takes e3, queen d1. So black cannot play immediately rook e1, but white's pieces are completely frozen, so almost in the Zugzwang. Even no need to capture here the rook takes c3 and to avoid white some counter chances after queen takes h5. So instead, Chigorin just simply moves the pawn. h4, bishop d2, h3. And white had to resign because the threat is queen g2 and then f1 promotion with a check. Otherwise, black is also intending h2 and then queen g1 with a checkmate. So, already the first game played by Mikhail Chigorin showed us the greatest potential for black after the pawn sacrifice. So instead of trying to win some material back immediately, Chigorin already in this first example, quite early example in his practice, decided, and I believe that this plan was already prepared at home, just to improve his position, to increase pressure over the white's king side, and only when all black pieces are ready for final attack, so he just started the decisive combinations. So now let's move forward with 1 year later, 1883, and still the same two players. Henry Beard against Mikhail Chigorin in London International Chess Tournament, 1883. And instead of playing so knight g5 d5, e takes d5, knight e5, instead of playing bishop b5 check, Henry Beard moved the pawn d3, like it's happened in a few games which already saw by Morphy and Anderson. Anyway, after h6, knight f3 and e4, Chigorin already even here showed the new developments in the theory. After queen e2, knight takes c4, d takes c4, and bishop c5, h3, short castling, and knight h2. Instead of trying to move the rook to e8 and then move the knight away from f6 and then f5 and f4, Chigorin immediately shows the right plan. So he has two bishops and he decided to demolish white's center by the tactical shot b7, b5. So it's quite important to destroy white's center and still to keep the pawn on e4 and send to the two bishops and quite passive position of all white pieces. Black is reaching great situation in very, very fast. Knight c3, b takes c4, queen takes c4, queen d6. Don't forget that because position now is open, so black is going to use the additional threat as bishop a6. So right now white almost forced to play short castle, otherwise bishop a6 and you never could castle anymore. Bishop a6 anyway comes, knight b5, and already here Chigorin could play queen takes d5, but he decided to go for more and moved the queen to b6. a4, knight takes d5, queen takes d5, c6. So instead, of course, white played queen takes e4, still after c6, serious problem for white. Knight g4, white is trying in the counter-attack to create some chances on the king side. but Chigorin is quite easily destroys white's dreams about it. F5, queen e6 check, king h7. This is another quite typical for Chigorin. So his tactical talent was so great that he usually allowed his opponents to perform some combination, because he always see just for one move ahead. So, and also here looks like knight takes h6 is a great chance for white, destroying black's position on the king side. But Chigorin simply plays rook f6, and white is completely losing position after queen a5. G takes the pawn, and c4, c takes b5, a takes b5, bishop b7. So this smoke is cleared up, and we can realize that black not just having the extra piece, but completely winning position. C takes d5, bishop d4, queen h7, queen e7, king h8, bishop f4. But piece is a piece, so black is just continue his attack on the king side. Rook g8, g3, rook g7, queen check, king h7, and not so difficult here to realize the advantage, because black is just one move away from queen c5 takes d5, after which white's king would be under mating threat over the long diagonal a8, h1. Rook a4, rook f to g6. Already threatening in some variation, rook take g3. Don't forget that f2 pawn is pinned right now. Queen b8, so white is trying to support the g3 pawn, but not for a while. Bishop takes d5. So now if white trades the queens after queen takes b6 and bishop takes b6, and just simply piece up. Rook a6 played. And once again, Chigorin performs the last and very nice combination. Rook takes g3. So white cannot capture with the pawn. Bishop takes g3 is only move, and now queen takes b8. So don't forget that the bishop is pinned as well. Game is over. So 2-0 for Chigorin against Henry Bird in this Chigorin's Gambit 2 nights. Great. And after these very successful games played by Chigorin, so we would like to continue a few more, which I would like to show you against Showalter and John Baird from US Congress 89-89. World champion William Stanitz decided to analyze his position. He was very curious. How come that in the starting position after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, knight f6, and knight g5, d5, e takes d5, knight a5, bishop b5, check, c6, takes, and bishop e2, white is having extra pawn. All his pawns are still on the second rank, which according Stanitz gave white clear advantage in the endgame, because according to the Stanitz theory, usually in the endgame it's better to keep the pawns on the second rank, because in that case we can choose and decide which way to move the pawn and what kind of a pawn chain to create. So white could decide to place d3 or h3 or g3 or f3, whatever. So in his famous magazine, Stanitz published the article where he said that he knows that Chigorin plays this position very successfully, but he really to say, not believes that black is having here enough compensation. So that was the start of, I would say, the greatest battle between two greatest mind of the 19th century, the greatest world champion, father of positional chess, Wilhelm Stanitz, and the father, I would say, of the combination play, Mikhail Chigorin. But before we move to that, of course, we continue with the greatest game of Mikhail Chigorin in that line. So the next game happened against the Jackson Showalter, also one of the top chess players at that time. So in 1989, Jackson Showalter decided to test the recommendation of the current world champion Wilhelm Stanitz and play this position against Mikhail Chigorin in United States Congress. So after bishop e2 and h6, knight f3 and e4, knight e5, so Chigorin continued his receipt and played queen c7. And d4, e takes d4, e takes d, so knight takes d3, only move, and bishop d6, exactly according to the line we were considering just a few minutes ago. So white cannot castle immediately, and after h3 short castling, black is getting just quite serious compensation for the sacrificed material. So in that game, Jackson Showalter decided to move the pawn immediately f4. Looks quite nice idea. So white is intending just to play short castling, then bishop comes to f3, knight comes also to the center, c3. What exactly compensation black has here? It's the greatest question. Indeed, Chigorin believed in great potential in black's position and simply continued here, short castling, and didn't like to start here immediate action, just continue developing the pieces. Bishop f5, according to the all gambit principles, most important, first of all, to develop your pieces on the most active positions, and only then to start the attack. So bishop come to f5, black is connecting the rooks, so rook is coming to e8, second rook is ready to go to d8, black is getting quite great outpost for the knight or the bishop on e4, white's f pawn also somehow prevents white dark square bishop from being activated, so a bit locking activity of this bishop on c1. Knight c3, rook ad8, queen e1, rook f to e8, already quite serious sign. So black is finished all his development very fast, but white is still needs to make some prophylactic moves, so to move the queen away from the threat of black's rooks over the open files. So queen has to leave the e1 square as well. Queen g3, and another typical resource, knight c4. So knight from the side of the board immediately comes into the center. So black is also intending to play queen b6 maybe, and then to bring the knight to e3. b3. I believe that Showalter saw, of course, that after queen b6 check and knight e3, he has to give up his bishop on c1, but I guess he was quite happy doing that. Let's say after queen b6 check, king h1, knight e3, so white could even exchange his bishop, bishop takes e3, rook takes e3, and then move the queen away to f2. It's quite playable position. Indeed, as usually happened, Chigorin just prepared very unpleasant surprise for his opponent. He moved knight d5 because black is having so great development, all the pieces very active. So white is start feeling some problem with about his hanging bishop on e2 and hanging knight on c3. After knight takes d5 and c takes d5, it's quite obvious that white simply cannot accept losing this bishop on e2 after c takes d and rook takes e2. So why after that, let's say c takes d5, it's quite dangerous. Also black could simply capture on c2 and white pieces have no greatest squares and two bishops and very strong kingside attack. Pay attention that black's rook already on the second rank threats bishop e2. So more and more pieces coming into the game very, very fast. White is in big trouble here. So after knight takes d5 and c takes d5, white decided to play bishop g4. Bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, and knight e3. Still, Chigorin is keeping very unpleasant threat. So after bishop takes e3 and rook takes e3, pay attention, white cannot accept queen takes e3 move because bishop c5, winning the queen. And after queen d2, that would happen in the game. Bishop takes f4. White is having additional problem now. g3 will be met by rook take g3 and the queen is gone. So h3 also not so great. White decided to sacrifice the pawn on h2. But this already leads to the situation when black is having not only positional but also material advantage. Queen f2, bishop takes h2 check, king h1, d4, rook a to d1, bishop g3, queen d2 and queen e7. Very typical for Chigorin. So he immediately launched the kingside attack. So not allowing white even a 1 second for breeze without any problem. So now queen h4 is coming. Bishop h3. So white prevents queen h4 idea, but now bishop c7, new idea, queen e5 and queen h2 checkmate. Here opposite color bishops only increase black's advantage because black is having almost decisive kingside attack when all white dark squares are completely unprotected. So white's position is totally hopeless. Queen f2, rook d5, rook d3, rook h5, king g1, bishop g3, queen d2, rook e2, queen d1, and once again bishop c7. How to stop queen e5? Now it's no time. Rook f3, queen e5, rook f4, check, takes, and black is winning. There's no way to stop the decisive checkmate threat, or what is going to lose the full exchange for nothing. So when the game happened, quite easy, you can see that queen takes h5 will be lost after check and mate. In the game happened queen e2, but after massive exchange on f2 and rook c5, white is losing all the pawns on the queen side, and in that position Jackson Showalter decided to call it a day and resigned. So another great example of developing the attack after increasing the pressure in the center. And also in this game we can see the great domination of all black pieces. Black pieces just much better than white pieces in this position, and this is the most important factor in material advantage. Thanks everybody for watching my third lesson about the Chigorin's attack in the two knights defense variation. And on our last lesson, next time, I would like just to present you the most important, I would say, the games for development of all this line, which were playing between two greatest minds of the 19th century, William Steinitz and Mikhail Chigorin. See you next time. Bye.